Well, the current social change system is very much legislating change. So when there is a problem, people lobby, new laws get passed, and the goal is ultimately to use legislation to get people to change behavior in some form or another. And it's a very blunt instrument, and it works for incremental change, more or less. It's one of the few systems we've got that has got some workability for change. Another way that change is done, it's not really how you get the long-term change, but it's a short-term catalyst, is a social protest or boycotting or marching, where you say no to something, say that's not okay. But what again we find falls short there is that we don't have a yes and a how-to, other than maybe passing a law. But how do you pass a law that's going to change what happened in New Orleans? You need other strategies. And so we need to rethink this whole process. Another way that the old social change model has been designed is financial incentives. The hope that if you change the tax laws, you get people to change their behavior. And again, in some cases it has some impetus in the right direction, but we have to, it's not innovative enough. It doesn't really deal with the fundamentals of why the system broke down in the first place. So those are some of the traditional ways that social change has been done. And my experience over these 25 years with our Empowerment Institute and our various, and the various projects and programs that I've delivered in this country and around the world has shown me that if you have the right approach, people are willing to voluntarily change behavior, which is the ultimate gold standard for social change, is that you get people to actually change their behavior and do things in a different way that enables society to improve. The question then is, what does the new one look like? I've identified 5 specific qualities that represent it, and I have been doing enough field testing so that these qualities come not out of a theory, but come out of what I've observed have worked. And I might add that what I've observed has worked has come out of working with several 100,000 people over the last bunch of years in many cities around the country. So the first quality is what I call the quality of the unitive field. And what I mean by the unitive field is we begin to create change strategies that have there be no other, that there's just us. So a lot of the old social change models have been us and them. So you may get a change, but you end up polarizing a significant percentage of society, and then you end up having to it gets very vociferous, the kinds of debates that go on. And not to say that there aren't going to be lots of points of view about lots of issues, but when you set up a strategy which is divisive, where you have the us and them, it becomes very difficult to create a sustainable evolutionary change. So the key then that we've looked at for our strategies have been unitive, where there is no other. And we've had a lot of examples of that. So when we work in a community, we try to bring citizens and city together. We try to bring the system and those who participate in it together. And we look at partnerships. So whenever I go into a city, I always make sure I'm working with the local government or the state or federal government agencies that are responsible, and I'm working with citizens. And we've done that, for example, right now in New York City around the issue of emergency preparedness, where we're working with the federal government and the local government to prepare citizens in New York City so that they don't get upset with their government and say, you didn't do it right. The city is now saying, let me empower citizens so that they can prepare themselves for an emergency. Citizens are seeing their government enabling them, not setting up this, you're on your own, but enabling them to actually be responsible. So that's an example of how you would build what I would call a unitive field, and beginning to get everyone to see their common interests served through the strategy. Another principle is what I call the phrase I use is evolutionary. And what I mean by evolutionary is that you aren't trying to overthrow the old system. The old system is what we've got to work with. You build on it. So you look at gradual change. I call it the growing edge. And I use the natural world as something to learn from in terms of the best strategy for long-term change we've got. What we see is that if something's alive, it's always growing. You don't see each year that the trees, go into demise and then they have to be replanted. They just continue to grow. There's always the next growing edge. And so I look at that and I say, where is the next growing edge? What's the next place of growth and opportunity around a change issue? And what's already in place and how do we build on that? So for example, using the issue of emergency preparedness, or using the issue of environmental change, or using the issue of working in low-income neighborhoods to work with people who are disenfranchised. Working in inner-city Philadelphia or inner-city Kansas City, Missouri, they have rejected the government because they've never felt served by them. So when I worked to bring this program into the inner cities, what we found was that we were bringing government back in and getting them reinvested in the possibility of them being a partner. We had to get the city government agencies themselves being reinvested in working with citizens because they've had a difficult experience. So we've evolved both parts of the system, the citizens and the cities, to show how they can in fact get better results than to, let's throw out the baby with the bathwater and start redesigning the whole system, which would be an immensely difficult thing to do, and at the end of the day, relatively unproductive, because we have what we have. How do we get it to work better? If you go too far beyond where there is a receptivity and willingness to go, there's pushback. People aren't ready for it. So finding what's really that next place of possibility. A lot of the projects that I've taken on have been what I call over the growing edge. I've really had to work very hard because the field wasn't fertile for it. And I've learned over the years, these gray hairs have given me a lot of learning as to how to be a little bit more selective on where I think society is ready for possible changes. So that's part of also what I mean by evolutionary, that next place of growth and the next opening possibility. And by the way, in this model, there is not there's an honoring of what I call the whole ecology of change. There has to be people that say, no, this is not okay, and protest, because that's an important piece of the puzzle. There've got to be people that are pushing the envelope and going way out beyond where the possibilities are. In fact, I still love to play in that realm. I just choose very carefully when I go there. But then there's got to be the people that are actually building the societal infrastructure to move it into the next level of possibility. And that's where I play on the niche of in the ecology of change.